Well, we knew Sarah couldn't keep quiet when there was something edited out of a statement. Thank you to all of you who put in comments and also emailed me that her full statement had been posted, and also that Brother Counsel had covered it, because I love Brother Counsel and I definitely want to go over to his channel and watch and see what he had to say. Tonight's video is going to be a little bit different. Rather than all the graphics, I'm going to read her letter and comment as I go through it, and then at the end share with you one big thing that struck me that hadn't struck me in my previous video. A lot of the language and word choice that she uses is the same with the additions that she adds in. It's more of the same vile, vexatious, awful stuff. And she's consistent with her narrative of totally innocent victim unjustly done to. But there are a few things that are worth pointing out as we go through it, so I'm going to read it to you, just the new parts, and then draw some conclusions from there. Let's get into it together. So let's get started with Sarah's cover letter to her statement. The first thing we notice is that she's demoted Judge Kraynick. Mr. Michael Kraynick. No Honorable Judge Kraynick, no Judge Kraynick, nothing. Mr. Kraynick. I am enclosing, please, my complete statement to you and the world, as I partially read during my sentencing hearing. By my reserving particular parts of my very true and meaningful statement, I was hoping to have been graced with your forgiveness, understanding, and consideration in any level or degree. For me, unfortunately, and regardless of whom I had speak on my behalf, or the number of, your ignorant mind was already made up. Let's take a look at a couple of things here. By reserving my particular parts of my very true and meaningful statement, I was hoping to have been graced with your forgiveness, understanding, and consideration. So she cut bits out, hoping that she'd get a better sentence because she knew if she included the rest of what's in here, or she was afraid that the judge would get mad and give her a lifetime sentence. So she cut it out, hoping to get a better sentence. That's very wily of her. By your clear error and full-blown, unfair bias against me since your involvement in my crucible case as a whole, I have been unsuccessful in receiving anything from you as a supposed fair and neutral judge, except for your wish that I spend the rest of my life in prison. Please know and always remember, Mr. Kraynick, I forgive you, still and sincerely. Please understand also the judge, according to Cicero, is never to lose sight that he is simply a man, and that he cannot exceed the power given to him by his commission, that not only power but public confidence has been given to him, that he ought always very seriously to attend not to his wishes, but to the requisitions of law, justice, and religion. And she cites where she got it from, which is refreshing after her plagiarism. The additions to this statement that we're going to look at tonight are in keeping with everything else she said in the statement. She casts blame on everyone else and takes no personal responsibility, and she is incredibly angry. But like I said, when I looked at this as a whole, I realized there was one major thing I hadn't seen, so stay tuned. She goes on to say, I am excited in my appeal, which speaks for itself. My case law as well, in which I am extremely proud to have achieved, and will continue doing so now that I am no longer in your corrupt court, and free from your malevolent judicial grip. Sarah Boone versus State of Florida. I have also added to my statement, as a result of your blindness and impartiality. Foremost, your disgust in me as being an outspoken woman, determined defendant, and proactive client, hoping the next time you put on your listening ears and do not unfairly oppress the next, as you have so blatantly done me. You will never admit your many judicial errors, nor will the prosecution theirs, and I will never admit to what you have wrongfully accused me of and judged me as. I am not a murderer, I am a survivor. Sarah Boone. All right, no remorse, no repentance, if there was any doubt of it. That makes it clear. She's not a murderer, she's a survivor. Wow. the judge will never admit error? Sarah, remember all that stuff you said about 1 point forward, 3 point back? 3 are pointing back at you, Sarah. But Sarah has never been one for deep self-reflection. She goes on to discuss something called black robe disease. It's a coined term about, a judge being too arrogant and powerful. And she quotes Bornier Law Dictionary, becoming an emotional genius, case law. I won't go through all that, but it's basically saying all the things she thinks Judge Kraynick didn't do, and that he's arrogant and overstepping his bounds. I bet she would like to put him in a suitcase. Then the statement begins, the one we heard in court, and I have that video that I'll link in the description below, where I discuss this in detail. And if you're watching this, I'm figuring you probably watched her statement as well. She goes into her Japanese art form, just as we saw. All that is the same. And this long discussion of George and all his alleged actions. And then the Torres family, social media, and the still no one knows me. This is where a piece got cut out and she's put it back in. She is still mad at her former attorneys. So my her golden forgiveness, also runs deep for my prior attorneys, Mauricio Padilla, who sold me the world with empty promises and then abandoned his responsibilities as my attorney after taking 2.5 years of my life, when finally realizing he was in over his head, all the while hoarding JAC dollars to fund his staycations with his family when in town from Miami, for having resources ready and available, not allowing me, the client, to ever utilize, which could have greatly progressed my case and perhaps concluded, only for him to decide water parks, fine dining, and choice hotels were more important, and on the JAC's dime. This is a lot of what she had said in the letter about him anyway, when she was complaining about him. She's added this little bit about, trying to get the taxpayers mad. Your money's being wasted by this lawyer. Oh, Sarah. Your whole trial used a lot of money. I forgive Frank J. Bankowitz for committing perjury to the judge and on court record about my attempts to be a proactive defendant and client, inquiring about my discovery, then trying to communicate with no answer or correspondence in any manner for a full year and 2 months before I was able to finally meet with him in the courtroom, only to receive his motion to withdraw. Frank J. Bankowitz is forgiven for his greed in taking $15,000 from the JAC, who honorably aid indigent defendants as myself, for taking advantage of and robbing the justice system by lying and avoiding clients, taking their money and the JAC's. Again, lawyers were corrupt, they're stealing, look, they're wasting taxpayer money, they're bad. Poor me. Winston E. Hobson receives my forgiveness, who also unethically perjured himself to the judge and on court record about all the progress and attorney work he did on my case for the 2 months he was court-appointed as, for his allegations of my supposed unethical requests, which meant me asking about my discovery and trying to have him file a motion for my lawful inclusion to my pretrial conferences, cited under FRCP discovery. I wanted to be included in my case and no progress from being excluded by Bankowitz and Padilla over 3 years prior. Forgiveness also in telling me he would return in a week with my discovery, only to receive his motion to withdraw in the meantime, still not receiving my discovery, and I filing my own motion, enabling me to go on to all my hearings, including my pretrials. Now, she's rehashing old news here about, I never got my discovery, I never got it, I never got it, I never got it, I never got it, when actually they have her handwriting on the discovery papers from way back when. So this, and again, Sarah knows that her lawyers can't answer this because whatever happened between them is covered by privilege. So she can go ahead and say whatever she wants. what is the point of all this anyway? She has already said all of it. To rake it all up, this is her one last grandstand. Finally, and with all my gold received from this one, I forgive Patricia A. Cashman for her mean, snotty, egotistical attitude and not listening or caring that I finally received my discovery I kept asking her for, which she fully withheld from me, citing her ridiculous, untrue reasons was because I saw it with my first attorney 4 years prior, and while she being my present and at that time attorney. I saw not one page of or any digital evidence of my discovery she prohibited me from seeing. Patricia A. Cashman is also forgiven for admitting I had a right to a bond that I asked her for so I could actually utilize one of my rights, as opposed to having them always violated as prior and still ongoing, than her deterrence of all my opportunities to do so. For all her lies, condescension, gross unnecessary arguments, and anger, that I asked any questions and wanted to understand, for her doing nothing other than give me an even harder time and request transcripts, then brazenly lie for over $16,000 for doing so, also from the precious resources provided from the JAC. I forgive Patricia A. Cashman for being a liar and a bully. Sweet heavens. Forgiveness for all those who did not include me to receive my $15,000 share I worked on for when Judge Kraynick forced me to be my own attorney to represent myself as pro se. I actually and finally got my discovery, almost 5 years later, filed motions all prior should have done, making them the most expensive motions ever, at over $46,000 between the 3 prior attorneys, Frank J. Bankowitz, Walter F. Hobson, Patricia A. Cashman. She uses their full names, including middle initials, to emphasize and point them out. Would they have done so when supposedly representing me? The motions would have been priceless for the proper use of the JAC funds toward ethics, professionalism, honesty, and freedom. Okay. I honorably utilized my JAC resources and mentorship as a proactive, indigent defendant, avidly defending myself against the liars, thieves, and real villains in my criminal case. Who really is the criminal? The JAC can hopefully include their forgiveness for them also. So she wants the JAC to extend the same bountiful forgiveness she has. Wow. Judge Wooten and Kraynick, I have great forgiveness for also, in not protecting me and listening to my valid request for judicial intervention so I could properly and fairly defend myself against my charges. Instead, I had to defend myself against the attorneys, all appointed by the judge and court, against their lies and exaggerations, reasons unjustifiable why they were really creeping away from the battlefield and abandoning their professional duty as my attorney. Creeping away from the battlefield. They were leaving her, so she was making it a battlefield? They were used to battlefields in court, if you will. So what was it about her that made them supposedly creep away? Judge Kraynick, I forgive you for not giving me any opportunity to stand at your pulpit, to stand at all, to explain the real, truthful side of the story. She has done this in previous letters where she's used the word pulpit for the judge as if it's a church. I believe that if the justice system, including yourself, would and should have done any vital homework on the already almost see-through attorneys from being spread so thin, and simply sending an email to care about their present workload, number of clients, trial schedules already in place before throwing another inmate defendant unknowing client on the heaping unimportant pile of warm bodies, more taxpayer dollars could be conserved, less time consumed and wasted for everyone, regardless of what part they play in the supposed system of justice. My forgiveness is deepened for taking even greater time of mine away, years, by not caring to ask me anything about anything, to understand so you could justly render your life-defining judgments and withhold any more bias and prejudice. Sarah mentioned this several times in her letters as well. She wanted to come before the judge and speak to him about what the lawyers were doing wrong, everything that was wrong. She wrote all these letters, and the judges were essentially like, no, I've seen what's gone on, and I have your letters, and I don't need to hear anymore. It's not surprising that she has this long statement, because it is one of her last chances, if not the last chance, to get all her grievances aired and vent her spleen, as we say sometimes. Actually, it calls to mind Judge Kraynick when he looked at her and said, I have read all your letters. I have listened to all the court tapes. I have spoken to your attorneys. Judge Kraynick listened to her. He just didn't agree with her. And she thought if she could keep on talking, she could change his mind. Foremost, Judge Kraynick, I forgive you for kicking me when I was down and choking the life out of my constitutional amendments, most profound my sixth, right to counsel, as a result of my wholehearted use of my first, right to free speech, in being my own advocate since no one else would be, and received a paycheck for. In all of my free speech, experience-driven letters, only for remedy, in any collaboration, inclusion, receiving my discovery as an inmate, defendant, and client, not removal of any attorneys, to cause more delays or any reason or excuse you may try to force on me, and have already inappropriately accused me of doing prior with your heavily insinuated strategies of mine. What? That's just a confusing mess of word salad right there. So let's look at the imagery first. I forgive you for kicking me when I was down and choking the life out of my constitutional amendments. It's an eerie echo to the kind of thing she would accuse George of supposedly doing. This goes back to her table of contents, if you will, that I talked about in the previous video. How all of her constitutional rights are still being violated. The rest of this, about free speech, collaboration, all of that, I'm not even going to give her the honor of rereading it to try and make sense of it. The strategies of mine to try and deflect the glaring red flags, disappointments, and true crime in and of the justice system. There is the crime of the justice system. Sarah, if you had been acquitted by some miracle, would you be saying this? You didn't get your way. This long diatribe comes down to a grown-up temper tantrum, like we've seen for the past 5 years. To this day and all forward, I do not forfeit my rights, any of them ever, especially in my right to be bold, outspoken, and right in my real-life experiences with the legal and justice systems. You weren't there, Judge Kraynick, in anything. No meetings, phone calls, visits, and still took my rights and oppressed harder. What? What meetings, phone calls, and visits? He was supposed to hang out with her in the jail? I must now defend myself against you, praying you do not care too late as all the others, and retaliate further against me as a still proud citizen of the United States of my America, and freely, excitedly use my God-given rights to still try and defend myself, to stand all the way up, for you to remove my freedom altogether by allowing and approving my stab wound, bloody body parts, rapes, bumps, bruises, and all the rest of the beatings I endured. I hope you can finally see and understand just some of the pain from the extreme difficulties, obstacles, and unfairness, especially in my due process, you have added in my criminal case, and use as an inmate, defendant, and client. All is forgiven. That is really harsh, to say that he approves of everything that allegedly happened. And as a side note, thank you to all of those in the previous video who told me about the neighbors and the stab wound most likely being caused by a broken wine bottle and a fall that she had. That makes much more sense. That whole weird steak knife thing never made sense. But again, Like in the previous video, she brings up the stab wound. Has to bring it up. Like in the previous video, she has a laundry list here of things that were done to her, and the most serious of all is put with bumps and bruises and all the rest. For Detectives Copsall and Lowen, I forgive their demonization, lies, blacklisting, coercion, law-breaking, solicitation of my case before I even arrived at the Corrections Department to be booked and fingerprinted. This can be seen in my unbeknownst interrogation video, where I ask what they are doing, what all the pinging was during their texting swarm, while I naively sit there waiting to be arrested, which they know would happen the day before, and for Copsall, for bald-faced lying on the stand to the judge in the court on record, she didn't tell me to come to the station to pick up my phone. Why else would I go? I didn't even know about the surprise interrogation. Rehashing her grievances, trying to relive the things that didn't work out for her in court. I forgive them also for lying how the news showed up to record my walk of shame, handcuffed and confused on camera. I forgive them for trying to make me lose from the beginning by starting the unquenchable wildfire of sensationalism and distortion, ignorant hate, defamation, and greed by unlawfully broadcasting who they wanted the world to think I was by their schemes, learned lessons, and fraudulent stratagems from the school of manipulation and taking advantage. Well, I thought that was social media, but apparently these detectives just started the whole social media news storm. It's all because of them. Like they don't have anything else to do with their days. How much did they make off me and still are for calling it in, then removing the curtain to expose their personally twisted murdering monster? Wow, she's accusing them of taking kickbacks from media? Also, my forgiveness and greater gold comes from wondering why nothing viable in my defense was taken from my townhouse, aka the crime scene, to aid in my truth, such as the butcher knife, five-pronged garden claw, or hammer under the table, together outside where George had easy access to use if I tried to leave or call for help, while being held against my will during his rageful binges, or my bloody pillowcase stained from me being backhanded because I hid the magnum-sized bottle of vodka from him. Why weren't any crime scene photos taken of the holes patched in the walls and doors, some doors missing knobs and all locks George removed, cracked windows, broken furniture, obvious unnatural destruction in my townhome? How and why were these missed, uncared about or not questioned, so I could explain some of my terror? It makes no difference. All is forgiven. Yeah, this reads like somebody who's ready to let it all go and forgive it. Prosecutors Mr. J and Mr. Cacciatore, my forgiveness is also extended for your inappropriate attributed motives, for having to go through years of my pictures, videos, texts to erroneously piece together your deceitful, damning version of what really happened and who I am. After so much availability and for so long, you were finally able to make the circle fit into the square. No, they were able to put the evidence before a jury and get you convicted. I forgive your antics, theatricals, ludicrous comments to make sure the world got their money's worth while watching with ignorant pitchforks and burning torches, hoping for the best from you, which is my worst. Instead of dropping the mic, Mr. J, you drop the bat. Oh, wow, bet she was proud when she came up with that one. For the yelling, finger-pointing, and intense underlining to force your theoreticals and fanatics on the jury by using fantastics on the jury by using imaginary space adventures and fictional characters to blind and bedazzle them with your far, far away from the truth dramatizations. I love the intense underlining. If you've been looking at this as I read it, or if you've looked at any of Sarah's letters, she is the queen of intense underlining. So yes, I guess if someone can recognize intense underlining, it's Sarah Boone. Imaginary space adventures and fictional characters and dramatizations. No, they pulled out the actual suitcase, and you helped show very calmly how George was in there. In all of your pieced-together productions, I forgive you most for never seeing the light in people, their human goodness, humor, and big hearts. You wake up to seek out the opposite, to condemn, to take lives in your own way. Well, you didn't make it easy to see the light in you, Sarah, if there is any, when we watched those videos and saw those texts and read your letters. See the good that does exist in all of us, inherently and unforced, even as the proud Mr. J stated, the kicked dog that bites. Mr. J, who kicked the dog in the first place? In my wisdom, it's usually best to leave sleeping dogs lie, then they don't bite. So we just should have let Sarah go and let this whole thing go. And the jury. My gold goes out to the jury. Now this is important right here because she has suddenly shifted her analogy. Up until now, it's been this forgiveness that she gives that becomes gold and for her in the cracks of her redemption. So she forgives. That forgiveness is the gold that's poured into the artwork that is Sarah Boone to repair her. But she's giving her gold away here. She is the one giving gold to others, not receiving it because of her magnanimous actions. My gold goes out to the jury for not understanding my cracks, from being blindsided from the injustice and malpractice in all of the judicial and prosecutorial errors, the very apparent violations of my constitutional rights during my case and entire trial, which caused mass confusion and dysfunction. I forgive the jury, truly, for being weary from this confusion and dysfunction. Also from being hungry and tired and wanting to go home to their families after being away from in full capacity for 2 full weeks. I understand. That's another one of her not so subtle slams. You were tired and hungry and wanted to go home to your family, so you convicted me. From this and their brash, misguided, corrupted decision, I was wrongfully judged a murderer instead of a survivor. For this, all is forgiven. For this, I can still survive and stand tall, having an even greater, the greatest opportunity to finally be understood in the Supreme Court for my appeal. I didn't lose. God just wanted me to win in a different way. Freedom and forgiveness. Yeah, there still is a little more. Okay. Her view of the jury, the slam about you're hungry and tired and you're going home. But then, brash, misguided, and corrupted decision. So I forgive you, you corrupt, brash, and misguided people, basically calling them stupid, influenced by social media, all the theatrics, unable to discern what she considers truth. Anyone who stands in her way becomes her target, like George. Unfortunately, George didn't get out of the way fast enough. And I also love the hubris of assuming that her appeal is going all the way to the Supreme Court. I'm feeling her appeal is going nowhere. Appeals aren't like regular trials. The defendant doesn't have a lot to do with it. It's the appellate lawyer who simply looks over all of the law and decision that was made in the case to see if there's something to warrant an appeal. Sarah is not going to have much, if any, say in her appeal. And that's going to come as a shock to her. I see they've appointed an appellate lawyer for her, and good luck. Good luck. And then she goes on to the sentence we heard in court, the section we heard in court about I forgive myself, basically for not killing George sooner. And the rest is what we did here in court about being a soft-spoken survivor. One particular thing really struck me as I read through her complete statement today, and I can't believe I didn't see it earlier, but remember in my previous video when I was talking about how she almost presented herself as a deity. She even slipped up and said that with her light she wanted to draw people to her. It struck me as she talks about her grand forgiveness of all of this awfulness that's been done to her. In the Christian tradition, Christ himself forgave people for crucifying him. She is setting herself up with the same type of framework and narrative as Jesus himself. She is the complete victim, totally innocent, unjustly done to by the courts. Judge Kraynick is a kind of Pontius Pilate, but she forgives everyone. The problem is that you can go through her entire statement and take the word forgiveness and replace it with hatred. I hate you for doing this to me and this to me, kicking me, tripping me, whatever. I hate you, not I forgive you. It's almost as if she writes it with hate in her heart, knows she can't use that word, and so grittingly uses the word forgiveness, or condescendingly uses the word forgiveness. She may like her thesaurus, and she has her handful of words she's misused in this letter as well. But she really needs to look at a good dictionary for what forgiveness is. She does not get it. And I'm even starting to wonder if she actually has convinced herself her version is real. She is so absolutely adamant now in this battered woman defense that I wonder if she really believes it, if there's some level of delusion. I'm not a psychologist, but I would love to hear what one thinks about that. I'll have to go over to Hidden True Crime and see if they're going to comment on it anymore. Anyway, I know this was a little bit different setup than our normal videos, and once again, I really want to thank the people that both emailed and put in comments that this letter was up. I wasn't thinking there was going to be anything more in the Sarah Boone letter department for her criminal trial, so I appreciate the heads up on that. And thank you for watching and spending your time with me tonight. I am figuring this probably is the end of Sarah's letter writing tenure. I think it's just time for the end of Sarah and her grandstanding. She needs to just spend a little time maybe learning what forgiveness really is. And I hope that the Torres family finally gets some, if not total peace, at least some sense of closure after all this time. Thank you again for watching. If you're new to the channel, please, we'd love to have your subscription to join our fun and friendly family of Guilty Word folks. Until we meet in the next video, please use your words wisely and well. Take care.